Hello and welcome. I'm Jennifer McGuire, and I'm really excited and honored to be here for this Crop and Create event. Now, my video will be very different than others you've seen in this event. My goal here is to take a bunch of different products from the box you received and use them together in creative ways. So this is all about mixing it up and stretching your products. This isn't meant to be a video that you create along with, but rather one you watch and then go create after. I've got a lot to squeeze in. Now, I'm not going to show you all my cards at the beginning. I'm just going to show you as we go, so there's surprises throughout. But let's get started with this card that turns some of your products into a fun ornament shaker card. Although my card has a holiday theme with an ornament, I will share ideas for doing other occasions and using this in many different ways. All right, so let's get started with the shaker window itself. I actually used the products from Your Next stamp that are included in the box. I really like the snow globe, and we're going to turn that into an ornament. But keep in mind, this snow globe could make any kind of shaker window. You could put whatever you want in it. So I'll show you the basic steps, and you can get creative with that. Now I need to form the walls of my shaker window. The way I like to form the walls is with scrap cardstock. Now you can use any scrap cardstock for that, but my suggestion is to use any kind of packaging that might just end up in the recycling bin anyways. So this is the packaging from one of the stamp sets included in our box. I'm just die cutting from that. It doesn't matter if it has anything on it. No one will ever see. I do also keep scraps when I mess up my stamping or I just have a little bit of paper left over, and you can use that for this too. I'm going to show you many ways to recycle some of your packaging in this video, and this is one of my favorite ways. I created 5 of those die cuts from scrap cardstock. However, I need one nice pretty white cardstock die cut to put on top. We'll do that now. You could also make this from colored cardstock or specialty cardstock, whatever you want. But I'm going to show you a trick to turn this snow globe die cut into a circle frame. So I have my die cut here from white cardstock. I'm going to put it back into the die, but I'm going to rotate it. That way, the bottom of that snow globe will get cut off. The circle frame portion of the die cut will pop right into the circle frame portion on the die. We'll run this through our die cut machine, and it'll cut off that little snow globe portion of the die cut. Now, this is a fun way to take this die and give it a completely different look. So we will be able to create an ornament shaker, but keep in mind, you could always leave the die cuts as they are and create a snow globe shaker. But me, I love to try to find ways to really stretch our products. When we invest in products, we want to get a lot of uses from them. And I'll tell you, all the products in this box are so amazing that I want us to be able to use them over and over. Now I can form the walls of the shaker. I do this by gluing those 5 die cuts together that we created from that scrap packaging. Now notice the base of the snow globe is still on this. I'm just going to cut it off with scissors. It doesn't matter how well I cut this because that pretty circle die cut on the right will end up on top of it and it'll hide any of my bad cutting. I could have done that trick where I offset the die cut in the die and run it through again, but there's really no reason to take the time to do that with each of these die cuts. Now, when you glue these die cuts together, you want to make sure that you get a good seal around them because you don't want your shaker bits to fly out or you don't want your shaker to fall apart. So I'm using a strong liquid adhesive all the way around the die cuts. This is Gina K Connect. I have it in a fine tip bottle, but it's the same glue that you all received in your box. Definitely my favorite liquid adhesive. After gluing all 5 of these scrap die cuts together, we have our walls for the shaker window. Now that special nice white circle over on the right, I'm not going to glue that on top just yet. We have to form our shaker first. This will be the last thing we glue on top, so I'm just setting that aside. Here you can see from the side the dimension we have to the walls of this. That will allow us to have some shaker bits on the inside and they'll move freely. Now we need to glue those stacked die cuts onto a piece of cardstock. You could use pattern paper, inked paper, you could use stamp paper, whatever you want. I'm just using plain white cardstock. I made sure to put glue all around the back so we have a nice seal and press that firmly on our cardstock. Once that's dry, I can use my scissors to cut around the edge. Now, notice how I'm holding my scissors. The bottom blade is kind of tilted in. That will allow me to cut really close, and I don't have to worry about it being seen when we've finished cutting. It really is not hard to do, especially if you tilt your scissors that way. So now we have the backing and the walls for our shaker ornament. By the way, if you don't want to cut around this, maybe you have a circle die that would cut a circle that is the right size to go behind this. You might have one in your stash. Next, we need a piece of acetate to go on top of our shaker window. Anything clear would work, and I think it's best to recycle some of your packaging. I chose to use this clear box that the Concord and Ninth ink cubes came in our class box. Now, you could use something thinner if you want to, like stamp packaging, but I would recommend doubling that up if you want to use something super thin. This is perfect. So I cut a piece out and I have leftover so I can make another shaker window later. Now we can fill the well of our shaker with any kind of sequins or bits that you want, even die cut shapes, which I'll show you later. I chose to use some of the close to my heart sequins included in the class box. So far we've used Concord and Ninth's box, Gina K's adhesive, close to my heart sequins, and your next stamp die. So we're really mixing things up and we have more to come. Now that I've filled that little shaker window, I'm putting more liquid adhesive around the top of the frame, kind of going to the outside edge of the frame so none of it oozes into the shaker well, gluing our little bits where they are. Now we can take the acetate piece, that clear packaging, and place it on top. I will press this down firmly to make sure it really connects and put something heavy on it, like a paperweight, to hold it there as it dries. While I give it some time to dry, let's create our note card. I have a piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock, and I have it in a scoring tool. I'm scoring it right in half, the long way, at 5.5 inches. This is how I go about making most of my note cards. I like to have some card bases saved, and this is what I do. I can make 2 at a time. So I fold along that score line, and then we can just cut this in half. So I'll put it in my trimmer and cut it right in half at 4.25 inches. So I was able to quickly create 2 card bases. We'll use one now, and I saved the other one for later. Now we can add some inking to the background, and I'm using the Gina K stencil included in your box. I love this stencil. I'm taping my note card onto the back of the stencil, trying to center the pattern up the best that I can. I like to put the tape on the card first, then I can just press the stencil into it and hold it there in place. Now you could do whatever inking you want here. I decided to use the Concord and Ninth inks included in the box and the Gina K blending brush that's included. So I'm inking around the outside edge with the lightest color, which is Aqua Sky. This is one of my favorite colors of ink. In fact, the note card base that I created is created using Concord and Ninth's Aqua Sky cardstock. I then switched to the Oceanside color and I put that towards the center and then overlap it a bit with the lighter ink we used on the outside edge. Inking over stencils like this is very forgiving and one of the reasons I like doing it. Then I'm taking the Midnight color and just putting that towards the center. I am in love with the results of this. I think this would be great with even a simple sentiment in the center. But let's go back to our shaker window. I want to turn that shaker window into an ornament. So I'm using this Spellbinders die set from the box. I'll use the bow dies and the string. Keep in mind there is a little ornament topper die included. I decided not to use that on this card, but you could if you wanted to make it look even more like an ornament. I created the bow from silver cardstock and the string from white. All right, so I have my note card and I glued my little shaker window right to the center. Now I'm putting a line of glue above the shaker window and gluing that string die cut onto it. If you wanted to, you could even use real string. Then I can glue my bow right on the top of the window itself, right along the top of the frame. I felt like this looked enough like an ornament that I didn't need the ornament topper die cut, but you could include it if you want. Once dry, I'll cut the string off, and there we have an ornament created out of that snow globe die. All I need to do is add a sentiment, and I'm using the other Spellbinders die set included in our class box. I wanted it to have the same color of ink that I used on our background. So I'm taking the Oceanside ink cube and dabbing it onto white cardstock, just a small area so that I can put the greetings die on top of that and die cut. That will give me a die cut that's a perfect match for my background, and I don't have to go digging through my cardstocks. This next step is optional, but I also die cut greetings from a scrap piece of white cardstock, and I'm gluing it behind our inked one. This just gives it a little dimension and a little bit of strength. Once I have those glued together, I will take the two parts of the greeting and line it up on the grids on my work surface. Then I'll take a piece of tape and lay it across it to pick it up. This will make it easier to get it positioned just right on our shaker window. So I pick it all up, flip it over, put liquid adhesive along the back of all of the letters, and then pick up the tape and place it right onto our shaker window. I can leave the tape there until it dries, and that will hold it in place, making sure there's a good connection. Once I'm sure that has dried, I can remove the tape and we have our completed card. The best part about this card is we used lots of different companies together, and we were able to take one die and give it a completely different use. We turned a snow globe into an ornament. I also made my own colored cardstock by using an ink that matches our background. Another idea for you is to create two of these shaker windows, just like we did this one, but make two, and glue them together back to back with a string sandwich between it. And that would be an ornament that you could give to someone as a keepsake. You could even tie it on the front of their card and they just remove it to keep it. All right, I will give you more ideas for other things you can do with shakers as we do our next example, which is also a shaker. However, with this one, it's a flat one. If you don't want dimension to your cards, this is a great option. And again, we're using recycled materials. This time I went for a cuter look, but you could do this in an elegant style, classic style, whatever you want. Let's start by creating the frame using this Lawn Fawn die set included in our class box. I love this set. I find the easiest way to use two dies to create a frame is to cut them separately. So first cut the outside, which is the scallop die, then place the smaller die onto that die cut. It's easier to center up this way. So we end up with a very simple frame that will go around our shaker window, but we don't need to die cut a bunch of these, just the one. I also have a piece of white cardstock that will be the background of our card. It is 4 by 5¼ inches. I'm cutting just the smaller rectangle die from the center, and then we can glue our scallop frame on top of this, lining up that center window. This will be the entire card panel that will glue onto the front of our card once we have our shaker ready. As I mentioned, with this shaker card, we're not going to build up walls to create dimension for a shaker window. Instead, we're going to use a little bag in there that will have the shaker bits that will move around freely. This is another great chance to recycle any of your materials. I looked through the box that we received with class, and there's a lot of packaging that could work as a shaker pocket. Here are 3 options. I ended up going with the Tailored Expression pocket, so it's just that clear sleeve that these leaf dies came in. I cut the tab off the top, and here we have a little pocket that's great to use for a shaker window. You could use any of the pockets in the box, but this was a nice size, slightly bigger than the frame that we created earlier. I like to cut a piece of cardstock to go in that bag, and then we can add the shaker bits. So I will cut a piece of cardstock slightly smaller than the bag itself so that we can easily slide it in. I thought I'd show you a trick that I like to do when I have a big shaker window like this. I like to glue a few of my sequins or die cuts, whatever you have in the shaker card. I like to glue some of them on the background. That way when the card's standing up and all the shaker bits fall to the bottom, some of them are still floating there. By gluing the few here, they stay floating, and they actually kind of form bumpers that force things from falling down completely. So it just is a great way to add a little bit of extra to your shaker windows, but you definitely could skip it if you want. I'm just putting dots of the Gina K Connect here and there on the cardstock piece and putting a few of those clear sequins onto the adhesive. Now notice in our shaker window, there are also little peach colored dots and peach colored hearts. One of the things that's fun to add into your shaker cards are little die cuts. especially if you don't have a lot of sequins and such on hand. So in this die set, again, from our class box, there is a small heart. I'll use that inside of our shaker card and on the outside, so it'll tie the whole theme together. I also noticed on this Brutus Monroe die set, there's a little Easter egg that cuts tiny little dots. Those little dots will be fun to have shaking in our card too. There are a lot of background dies that cut little dots too. Just look at your stash. Anything that cuts tiny little pieces are great to include in your shaker cards. So you can take a really small scrap of cardstock and die cut as much as you can from it, and look at all these little pieces that I have. Fun to add in the shaker card and help everything to match even better. This is cut from the same color of cardstock that I used for the frame. It'll match perfectly. To these die cuts, I'm also adding some of those sequins. We can slide our cardstock into the pocket. You see those sequins we glued there already. And now we can pour all of these little shaker bits into the front of the pocket. Then I'll fold it back. You can either tape it sealed, but this one actually has a seal itself that I just fold over, and we have a shaker pocket. And you can see everything moves around freely. We just need to tape this shaker window to the back of the frame that we created earlier. There are many ways you can do this, but you don't need to add any dimension. I prefer just to use Scotch tape. So I'm centering that over the back of the frame, and I'll put Scotch tape around all four sides. I do like to make sure it's around all four sides so none of the little shaker bits come out, and I don't have to worry about that thin pocket tearing in any way along the outside edge. So now we have a shaker window that doesn't have much dimension to it, and you can see everything shakes around nicely. And the best part is we just used some leftover packaging to create this. You could even use small little Ziploc bags. Now we can put glue around the outside edge of the frame and add it onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding note card. To put on the front of our shaker window, I used the Mama Elephant set from our box. I stamped it, colored it, and used the coordinating die to cut it out. I used Copic markers, but you can color any way you prefer. I like that this die cuts the little hands so you can slide something in. Instead of using one of the Get Well images from the set, I just die cut another small heart, and I'll slide that in between the paws. So it takes that image from a Get Well set and makes it a non-Get Well card. For a sentiment, I chose to use the Concord & Ninth stamp set and coordinating die, and I'll use the Just Wanted to Say, and then I'll stamp another sentiment on the inside of the card. After stamping Just Wanted to Say, I can line up that coordinating die. I really like how Concord & Ninth makes it really easy to line things up, but keep in mind, you could stamp any sentiment you wanted to onto this banner die cut. You just take any long sentiment and kind of put it onto your acrylic block at a curve, and then it'll fit the curve of the die. All right, so now I will fold the little ends of the banner, and we can glue the little bunny and the sentiment to the front of the window. So you really could glue anything you want on the front here. You could even have glued that little bunny on the inside of the shaker window. But I like it on the outside so that nothing comes in front of him and blocks his view. I put a little foam tape on the back of that banner die cut and then liquid adhesive along the edges, and we'll put that right on top also. For the sentiment on the inside, I chose Thank You from this Simon Hurley stamp set. I like that the style of these sentiments work with any style of card. So here is a look at the completed card. You can see how the shaker bits move freely inside of that shaker pocket, and there isn't much dimension to the card, so it should be easy to mail. So on this card, we use quite a few products once again, and a bit of recycled packaging. We have Mama Elephant, Concord & Ninth, Lawn Fawn, and more. And that little critter is from a Get Well themed stamp set, but we were able to keep it simple and use it on a thank you card. I also created my own shaker bits for inside of the pocket, and I created them with matching cardstock and hearts that go along with the theme of the card. Another thing you could do is use these Tailored Expression leaf dies and die cut a bunch of leaves and use those in your shaker window and do a fall themed card. Another option would be to use some of these smaller stamped images in this Mama Elephant stamp set. You could stamp and color those and die cut them and put those as shaker bits inside of the pocket. So you can even use tiny stamped images inside of a pocket for a shaker card. Oftentimes, little images get overlooked. This is a good way to put them to good use. Okay, so we've created 2 unique shaker cards using our products creatively. Now let's do some shaped cards. We'll start with these 2 party hat shaped cards. They look similar, but they're actually different in how they open. For these shaped cards, I'm using the Pink and Main die set. I think this is a great one. Yes, you can turn it into a slice of pizza, a piece of cheese, but we're going to stick with the party hat theme. I die cut a party hat from white cardstock, and I also have a folded white note card. I'm gluing this party hat die cut right up to the folded line of the note card so that the folded edge matches up with the left edge of our party hat die cut. This seems silly, but this allows me to turn this into a folded card. Now I'll use my scissors to cut around the edge of the die cut. It's not hard to do because really you just have this one curved line and then one straight line. I will say it's easier to cut around large areas like this using long scissors. These are my Tim Holtz scissors, but any long scissors would work. It's especially helpful when you're cutting along a straight edge, as I'm doing here. So we're turning this large die cut into a mini folded card. I'll show another way to do this with our last example in this video, so stay tuned. After I've cut this, look at this. We have a party hat shaped card. Before I finish off that card, let's create another shaped card with this die, but this time a tri-fold card. I love this one. So I have another die cut and I'm putting adhesive on the back. This time I will line the right edge of the party hat up with the folded edge of the note card. So this is another note card here, lining up the right edge of the party hat with the folded edge of the card. And once again, we'll cut along the outside edge of the die cut. This may seem a bit odd because when you open it, it's like a card that opens backwards. But don't worry, we're going to change it up. I'll put glue on the back flap of this card. So right along that party hat flap there that doesn't have the die cut on it. Then I will glue this onto another folded note card so that the folded edge is along the outside edge of that. So I'll just press that on there. This is going to look really weird, but I promise it'll turn into a really cool card in the end. All right, so this is what it looks like here. Now, once again, we're just going to cut along the outside edge of the party hat. I know it seems awkward, but when it's done, you'll see why it's probably my favorite shaped card I've ever made. Watch how this opens. It opens really cool, and you got a place to write your personal message in there, and it stands up on display very nicely. So now we have 2 different shaped cards made from that one party hat die. So we have the first one we did that just opens like this, and the second one we did that opens really fun. 2 fun options. I think the first one would be great for a tag on a gift bag too. Now we can add color to the cards. Over on the left, you'll see that I cut the party hat die 4 times from 4 different colors of cardstock. I could just glue individual dots into the openings on our card. But instead of letting the extra colored dots go to waste, I'm gluing together all 4 colored dots so that there's some dimension when we add it to our card. So see here, we have the circle opening. I'll glue our little die cuts right into that opening, and it'll have dimension. The other fun thing about gluing together the dimension with different colored die cuts is that you'll see that pink on top, but when you turn the card to its side, you'll see a little bit of yellow and orange showing, making the card even more fun. So I'll do the same thing for all the dots on the party hat, stacking together all the different colored die cuts and then gluing it in place. I think it's fun to see that peak of color when you look at the card from an angle. It's really cool on display. After I filled in all the dots, I used this little asterisk die from the same die set. I cut it once from white cardstock, once from gold glitter cardstock and glued it together just to make it stronger. And I used a foam adhesive circle to add it to the top of the party hat. For the sentiment, I'm using the Hero Arts stamp set and coordinating dies. I really like this set, especially because the coordinating dies cut nice and tight up against the stamped words, making it very easy to add it anywhere on a card. So I stamped the hooray with black ink and used the coordinating die to cut it out. I also used the coordinating die to cut 2 white cardstock scrap pieces to glue behind the stamped one. This is going to give that sentiment some dimension and strength. Remember, this sentiment will get glued over those dots. I don't want it to get squashed when it goes through the mail. So by giving it a little strength, it'll stay nice and flat, even against all of that dimension on the background of the card. The completed card is smaller than an A2 card, so it'll fit into a regular A2 envelope. And look how fun this is when it opens up. There's plenty of room to write a personal message on the inside, and it stands on display nicely. It even wobbles back and forth, which I think is fun. Here's a closer look at the dimension of those dots. Notice how you can get a little glimpse of color when the card is tilted. Behind the yellow dots, you see some pink. Behind the pink dots, you see some orange, just adding to the fun of it. Let's create the other party hat shaped card. This is the one that opens like a regular card. Notice that sentiment. I created that using holiday products, another great way to stretch your supplies. The Wishing You a Happy is from this pre-printed piece from Gina K Designs that's included in our box. Here's a trick for cutting that pre-printed sentiment so it's centered on your strip. Take a piece of scrap cardstock. I have a blue piece here. I'll put the blue piece into the trimmer so that the edge of the blue piece lines up with the cutting edge of my trimmer. I'm going to hold that blue piece there. I'll slide my pre-printed sentiment piece underneath it. And watch, I'll move that pre-printed sentiment piece until I like the spacing. That edge of the blue cardstock will show me where it's going to cut. I then can drop the blade of my trimmer and look at that. We have it nice and centered and cut and ready to go. For my card, I'm cutting these words apart so that I have wishing, and then I have UA, and on the other one, happy. Normally this would go with holidays, but I'm going to change it up and put the word day underneath it instead. This holiday set is included in our box from Gina K. I'm taking the holidays die cut and cutting off some of the letters. Now you have two options. You could use days or day, totally up to you. For the days, you could do wishing you happy days, just cut off that A, but I'm going with wishing you a happy day, perfect for a birthday card. So I have 2 day die cuts that I've created, and I'm gluing those together just to give it a little bit of strength because, again, I'm gluing this on top of the dimensional dots on our party hat. I also want some dimension and strength behind the wishing you a happy. So I have a cardstock strip, just some scrap cardstock, doesn't matter what color. I keep these little strips in a little container on my desk. It's a great way to give dimension to your sentiment strips. You could use foam tape, but this is cheaper, uses up some scraps, and it holds up better in the mail. Once I have dimension behind all of our sentiment pieces, I can glue them right under the front of our party hat. The party hat is assembled just like I did before, just different colors of cardstock and silver glitter on the top instead of gold. So here's a look at the completed card. It fits into an A2 envelope with no problem. You could also make this a tag on maybe a gift bag or wrapped present. Just tie some string to the top and you have a place to write a message on the inside. I love that I was able to take holiday greetings and use it for a birthday card. Sometimes making little changes to your sentiments really gives the stamp set even more life. So now we have 2 shaped cards. Each are a little bit different, but both using the same die set. I have one more shaped card for you, and this one is a really unique card, something fun and unexpected. We're also going to do some rainbow inking over a stencil. These Oh Hey products from Concord and Ninth are such fun and work great for a shaped card. So let's do that stenciling. I'm starting with the most open stencil first and taping it onto the front of a piece of cardstock. These stencils are 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So I have a piece of cardstock of the same size, so it's easy to line up. You just line up those edges. I do like to tape them together to make sure they don't shift as we ink. To create our rainbow, I have 3 ink colors. I have Gina K Designs Passionate Pink and Wild Dandelion. And then I have the Concord and Ninth Aqua Sky that's included in your box. To create the rainbow, you just need these 3 colors. I first put pink at the top, and I went farther down than I really want the pink to be. And then along the bottom, I'm doing the blue, covering a good amount of it. So we only have like a smaller area there in the center for the yellow. You want to take your color farther than you think here. The key to creating a rainbow out of 3 colors is overlapping. Anytime you overlap your ink a lot, you get a better blend and you can get a new color. In this case, when we add the yellow to the center and overlap with the pink, we get orange. In the area where we overlap the yellow and the blue, we get green. So I was able to get a full rainbow here just with the 3 inks. It's a great way to extend your inks and save some time. I use dye inks for my ink blending, but you could use absolutely any inks here you want. Pigment, oxide, dye, hybrid, really doesn't matter. And look how beautiful that blend is. Now it's time for the second stencil, and I'll line that up. Instead of digging through my stash and looking for darker ink colors, I'm just using the same, and I'm putting a heavier amount of that ink down. Over the first stencil, I did a light amount of ink. Now I'm doing a heavy amount, so it'll give us a great tone-on-tone look. I start with the pink at the top, then the blue along the bottom, and the yellow in the middle overlapping with the pink and the blue. It's good to remember that anytime you overlap inks, you get new colors. You can even overlap different colors of stamping to get new colors. All right, now this third layering stencil I'm going to set aside. We'll come back to it. Now I have the stencil that creates the shadow for these letters. Instead of using something colorful, which you could do, I thought it'd be fun to use a light gray ink so that the colors on the top of the letters really stand out. My favorite go-to light gray ink is Hero Arts Granite ink. I've been using this color for many years, and I'm just putting a light amount of this over the stencil. A little tip about using stencils in an ink blending brush. Any kind of inking tool over a stencil, you want to go in both directions. Notice how I circle in one way and then circle in the other way. That really helps to make sure you get ink all the way in all of the openings of the stencil, along all of the edges, and it gives you nice definition and kind of a little of a shadow look. So make sure you're blending in both directions. And look at that gorgeous result. I love these stencils. Now I'm going to use the coordinating die to cut it out. I haven't used that other stencil over there on the right yet. We're going to use it in a moment, but I do recommend cutting this out now because with that other stencil, we're going to add some dimension. It's best to do your dimension after die cutting. All right, so now this stencil I will tape onto it. The best way to do this is put tape on the back of your die cut, then lay your stencil on top of that, lining it up, and press down. That way the die cut is taped to the back of the stencil and won't move when we add our fun on top of the stencil. The fun that we're adding is clear glitter. So I have the pops of color included in our box, and I'm squeezing some of that onto one side of our stencil. This is clear with iridescent glitter, so it'll pick up the color behind it and just add some fun, texture, and sparkle. I'm just using a piece of scrap paper to spread it out across the openings of the stencil. Once I'm happy with how it's spread out, I will remove that stencil and immediately wash it clean so that it doesn't dry on the stencil and it'll be ready to go. While we set that die cut aside to dry, let's create those other 3 colorful pieces to decorate the card. I didn't have the perfect match of cardstock to the inking we've already done, so I thought I'd create my own colored cardstock. I'm using the same inks, same ink blending on white cardstock, and then I'll use the die to cut out the shapes. So if you ever are stuck and not able to find a good match, just create your own colored cardstock. After creating 3 spots of color, I'll use the die to cut from each, and I have 3 colored die cuts that match our inking great. You could even do some blending to get the look of dimension on it if you wanted to. I also created a Let's Celebrate banner from the Hero Arts die and stamp set that I used earlier, and I'm gluing that towards the bottom of the word hey. I can also glue those little die cut shapes so that they peek out from our sentiment. This card will go into a regular A2 envelope, so I can glue anything onto it that I want as long as it will still fit in that envelope. So I have an A2 envelope behind it just to use as a guide to make sure that everything will still fit. I'm not actually gluing anything onto that white piece that you see in the background. I do really like the Gina K Connect liquid adhesive because a little dab will do you. You don't need much of it, so you can easily squeeze some of the glue into these tight spaces and it'll hold tight. To give our card front a little bit more strength, I die cut another Oh Hey die cut, and I'm gluing it on the back. You really don't need to do this, but I like strength to my cards, especially when I want them to stand up straight. And this will sandwich those added die cuts between, making sure that they stay put too. Now to turn this into a shaped card, I have one more of the Oh Hey die cuts, and I'm putting a score line along the top. It really doesn't matter where you put it. I'm just holding this into my scoreboard, and I'll do a score line about a 1/2 inch from the top. You could make it a smaller area if you want to. You just want to create a little flap up there. This little flap will form a hinge, and it'll allow our card to open and close nicely. So I'll fold along that score line one way, and then I'm going to fold it back the other way just to kind of work it in to make it a nice hinge. I will lay that down flat and put a super strong adhesive above the score line and lay our inked die cut piece right onto that, lining it all up and pressing that top to make sure that adhesive holds at the top. Once that's dry, we have a shaped card. You can open and close it and easily write a personal sentiment on the inside. Now that's a smaller area for a sentiment, but sometimes the fun of a shaped card is worth it. And notice it'll still stand up on display. Such a unique look. And better yet, this will fit nicely into a regular A2 envelope. So this shows another way to take a large die and turn it into a folded card. In this case, we just cut another of the same die cut and made that hinge and glued it to the back, as you can see here. It opens and closed wonderfully. Now here's a closer look at our inking. You can see the two-tone inking and that glitter that we put on top with that Pops of Color glitter gel. Then we also have some iridescent sequins from Close to My Heart that I glued at the center of those flower die cuts that we added to the card. And by the way, if you don't want to make a shaped card from this, you could take this piece that we have assembled and glue it right onto a card panel. And you could just have this flap that opens on the front. Many ways you can change this up. I am really hoping that this video inspires you to lay out all of the products you got in this class box and think of different ways to use them together and ways to use them differently than expected. I laid all my products out on a ping pong table and had a ball finding ways to mix and match them together. I hope you'll do the same. Thank you for spending this time with me, and thank you to Catherine and the team for putting on such a great event. Have a wonderful time crafting.